Welcome to the Oncology Voice Network Podcast, connecting the voices that move oncology drug development forward.
Welcome to the very first episode of Oncology Voice Network Podcast. I am Ramin Farhood, and I'm here with my friend, my mentor, and co-founder, Dr. Kirk Shepard. Kirk, welcome to your own show.
Thank you very much, Ramin. Looking forward to it.
We started the Oncology Voice Network, or short OVN, with one simple but powerful idea that oncology drug development needs a home. And by home, we don't mean a physical place, but a connected community where every voice across pharma, biotech, academia, advocacy can come together, share, learn, and accelerate innovation. Today is our first episode, and I'm calling it our origin story, how the book Voices of Oncology sparked the movement, and how we interviewed 33 of the brightest and the smartest, most experienced people in oncology drug development, representing all different functions, come together and they share what's possible when the silos are busted up and are broken, and how those insights evolve into living, breathing network of OVN is becoming today. So, Kirk, let's just start at the beginning. What inspired you to write Voices of Oncology, the whole book? And I know it's been a while, it's like a year and a half, maybe a couple of years ago. Tell us through the journey.
Yeah, it was a big effort. In fact, it's been 2 years. It wasn't a year and a half. But the inspiration really came while we were working together at our pharmaceutical company. That's what started it. I mean, we lived the theme of this book. In other words, we knew there were silos there. Disciplines were staying within each other, not communicating. And we saw what happened when people weren't communicating and working together. Time went by, things weren't getting done fast enough. People were brought in and say, well, why wasn't I brought in earlier? So we lived that. In fact, if you remember, we started on our team the expression, we're the silo busters, like the Ghostbusters. I think we even had hats or something like that, something corny that we wouldn't do today, Ramin. But that was the beginning inspiration. In other words, what could we do to help people to communicate more and learn what each other do? And then the second part of the inspiration came at a pharmaceutical company I worked afterwards, that we had a number of things that we taught about as far as the science, as far as how to be a better manager. But the most popular area was for people to learn about the other disciplines of how they could work together better. In other words, we were saying that increased understanding could lead to increased collaboration. And the last part, as far as the inspiration of this book, was when we went out to get authors. These experts were so excited about this book, and they had said, why wasn't this done before? And we appreciate so much their efforts, which took a lot of time out of their schedules too, to put these chapters together to give a voice to Voices of Oncology.
Absolutely. I mean, it was so eye-opening for me, Kirk, when we started talking to these authors and just talking about the idea of this is what we've experienced and what are some of your thoughts. They were immediately like, oh, absolutely. I agree. The silos and everybody, it's fantastic that you know what you're doing in your own functions. But if you don't have the perspective of all the other internal stakeholders and also the external stakeholders, it becomes really a challenge to bring the new therapies to the patients. We didn't have a single person that turns us down about being an author, and which was amazing and very exciting at the same time. And we ended up with 33 and 24 chapters. I think originally we were thinking maybe about 12 chapters, 10 to 12 chapters, but more and more people got really interested and kind of fueled the energy.
And to put it to a page perspective, remember Forbes saying, well, this should probably be about 350 pages, but it ended up being over 500. So people were excited to want to communicate about each of their disciplines and how they work better together.
Do you think there is something uniqueness about oncology drug development that needs a community and needs a home? Is this specific to oncology?
It's not specific to oncology, but certainly the unmet need, I think, is highest there. The reason is oncology is so unique in a way that it moves very quickly. And that's by the intensity of all the research that's being done, people working on cures for cancer, but also the regulatory framework, which has really helped us. In other words, you have things such as a RTOR, a real-time oncology review, that you can have a drug approved in 4 to 6 months after your submission. And it's a rolling review. So this was started by Rick Pastor and the FDA and has helped immensely as far as our focus in getting these drugs out quickly and to the patients and their families. You also have other programs called Project Frontrunner, which brings the studies we normally would have done in the pharmaceutical business of looking at the last lines, third line, fourth line of products. They have tried to move these up front earlier so that these cures can be brought to patients. So I think there's also a pressing need in most therapeutic areas, but oncology is particularly acute just because of its complexity. And now you look at lung cancer, breast cancer, all the common terms used for these collection of cancers. We know now that they are divided up into many different areas depending on their genetic footprint. And these are then asking for better treatments and specific treatments.
And I think that the real cost of the silos, and it delays everything that we do in drug development. And the real cost, it's really ends up to be on the patients, right? Because the decisions are delayed, there's misalignment, the collaborations are delayed, and everybody has good intention, by the way. This is not like everybody wants to kind of do their own thing and they don't want to talk to anybody else or have any communication. It's just the way the system is set up. It's incentivized by making sure that you do what you're supposed to do in an excellent manner, right? And sometimes we lose sight of the fact that I need to be thinking as a team and with all of my stakeholders early on, and that's thinking across the enterprise, thinking across the ecosystem. It helps to make a better decision, faster decision, and as simple as it sounds, it's hard in real practice. Do you feel the same way?
I mean, it used to make me nervous. In other words, when we found out there was a delay because of probably a lack of people working together, as you said, trying to work together, but somebody comes in late at phase 3 and said, well, no, we should do it this way. It should be manufactured this way, or some other communication that perhaps we would need around the drug, that we need another study. That I saw that as time ticking by, that we get these drugs to the hands of the patients. So to me, it's just to me a very, very intense pressure that's on us to work together quickly, to work together early, and then to speed up our timelines as far as getting the drugs out appropriately.
Why do you think, Kirk, the silos persist? I mean, everybody that we talk to, they acknowledge it, right? And these are all the leaders and executives, right, that have authored the chapter, and even the one that you talk outside of the book, right? Everybody acknowledges, everybody realizes it, but it does persist. What's been your experience about that?
Yeah, I think there's a number of reasons. As I said, when you ask somebody about silos, you go, oh, no, we don't want silos. We want to work together. But then you think about what happens. People are very comfortable swimming in their own lane. They know what they are supposed to do. They get more uncomfortable when they start looking at the other people who are working with them. And that takes effort. And there are some people, too, who don't want you swimming in their lane, so that it has to be done with an appropriate balance. I'm here not to do your job, to interfere with your job, but I'm here to work with you so that I can do my job better. And also, you look at the incentives put forth by the pharmaceutical companies or maybe even academia. People usually have incentives that are set up around their discipline. If you're in publications, how many publications did you get out this year? If you are in R&D, did you get through phase 2 at this time like you're supposed to in phase 3? And perhaps don't think about the other things that should be done for market access or HEOR. So the incentives themselves kind of narrow the beam as far as what our goals are within each of these departments.
And it's been my experience that the greatest leaders in the top of the organization or even in their own function are really able and they have the capability to break down those silos so people can come around the table and honestly have those tough conversations that we don't necessarily want to agree on or we're not aligned on, but they have a way of bringing people together and kind of empowering them or forcing them to talk about the things that we don't necessarily want to talk about when we leave the meeting, right? We go on our own way. Everybody goes to their own department, and they may have a internal dialogue that, well, I don't really agree with that, or I don't really see it that way. And you're kind of forced into sitting in those type of meetings and talk about those conversations that are tough to have. And sometimes we're people, as you mentioned, you're in your comfort. You don't want to talk about it, and we want to be nice. Everybody is nice. They don't necessarily want to make somebody else feel wrong. And there's a whole art and talent to that. It does make it challenging to overcome it.
Like many things, Ramin, which you just were talking about, it's set up at the top. You have to have leaders who believe in that culture and share that. If that isn't believed by the leaders, then it's never going to happen. And they can even change the incentives. In other words, more incentives or goals that count for the company together, or you getting a goal in cooperation with another department of twos. All that is set up at the top and really needs to be a culture set up by the leaders.
Yeah, absolutely. Kirk, talking about collaboration, and I know you interviewed every single of the 33 authors for the book, and you have decades of experience, and you're kind of like the grandfather of the 4 pillars that you and I have talked about ever since I know you from 2012. Tell us a little bit about the 4 pillars. What was the genesis of the 4 pillars? And I know sometimes there's 5, sometimes there's 3. Some companies have 7. Tell us a little bit about that, and how does that help bring the book together?
Yeah, the pillars actually started about 20 years ago, maybe a little bit longer than that. And I didn't do them myself. I worked with partners on this from our department in a company. And we had trouble illustrating at that time what medical affairs did. And then also people were having trouble communicating what R&D did simply. Well, the pillars put it into a visual perspective. You can see the 4 pillars there in front of you. Yes, there were 5 at one time, but we saw that they could be condensed into 4. And this is from, over 2 decades of people looking at these and making changes to them. And the 4 pillars are the first pillar is about leadership and strategy, which is important to every discipline. They have leadership and strategy there. Let's talk about it. The second thing is the data or insight generation. How do you generate that to support your product? The third pillar is about the communication then of the data and the insights to others within the company as well as outside. And the fourth pillar is about partnership, both inside and outside the company. How do we develop those partnerships that make us stronger as a group? And then below that, very important are the enablers, the foundation that support all of those 4 pillars. And that would be around operations and metrics, talent, compliance, all these things that make us better in those 4 pillars. And of course, very strong coming on in the last few years is technology. In other words, digital and AI. So it kind of puts it in a visual perspective and also helps you to sort your mind as far as what we need to do as a department. And we actually structured the chapters of the book, as you know, around those 4 pillars so that people could talk and it would be organized. And as a reader, you could look at each of those chapters and you know where you're going to find the strategy and leadership right up front under that pillar. You could actually skim through the book, and maybe you want to read about strategy and leadership about a number of disciplines, you'll know where to find it. Or you could just do a deep dive in each of the disciplines and go through all the pillars and the supporting information. So it's come from years of developing. It's been fun. And it's also been fun seeing that they persist and that people believe in those pillars as a way of communicating what they do.
It's so interesting that even though when we're in our own company and working and we come up with either 3 pillars or 4 or 5, and then you start kind of looking at what other companies are doing, is very, very similar, right? It kind of keeps you grounded in what you really need to have in order to be successful in drug development. And it's not, I really like what you said about insights, and it's not just about the internal team, right? The insights from the clinicians, from the opinion leaders and thought leaders, the scientific community, the insights from the advocacy groups, the patients incredibly is so important. The earlier you bring that into the drug development, the more successful your entire program will be. Again, some of these ideas are really simple and it's been around for many years, but we all get kind of caught up in our day to day and what we need to do, and we sometimes lose sight of how important that is. I had the fortunate to be on the pillar side and also on the foundation side, on the enabler side, and I have such an appreciation for the enablers and the foundation that they built. They're like the glue that brings the entire pillars together, and just kind of like making sure that there is harmony and coordination that is happening among all the focus areas or the pillars that we are talking about here. That's incredibly important. It's exactly what it is. It enables the rest of the organization do what they're supposed to do without focusing on the things that will be distracting to them as well.
The funny thing was the first time I remember presenting those pillars, or close to the first time, the CEO was in the audience. It was at a big company meeting. And he came to me afterwards and said, for the first time, I understand what you do. And so we realized how important that was to put it in a pictorial form and also to see them change as we move it along, because some of those pillars have become more important or different. Like it used to be the second pillar was just data generation or evidence generation. But now we thought it was important enough to put insights in there because they have become so important as far as directing a company, as far as the direction. And the enablers, of course, the technology is one that's become a big rock that we're all sitting on top of.
What about Kirk, moving from the silos to the synergy and collaboration? What is it about collaboration and coming together that makes the whole program to be successful?
Well, collaboration is really where you're working together and you're looking for things that are standing in the way. And one thing about the effort that we should all put forward and the book is that if you understand your partner and what their incentives are, their motivation, you're going to help them to become a better partner. You're going to be able to communicate with them more often. And, one thing about the book is that, remember, one of the things we discuss is, well, what order should we put them in? Well, why don't we just put them in the order they come through drug development? The early people will go first, and in the middle will be the ones who come, in the middle of the drug development, and then the later ones. But the main theme with almost everybody talking about is I want to collaborate early with my partners. I should be brought in very early, even in preclinical, to begin the communication. Yeah, I may not be doing a whole lot, but it plants a seed. It makes us prepared as far as when we should come in, and maybe we may go out for a little bit and come back in again. So having that kind of a spirit as far as collaboration, I'm not trying to close people out, but being more inclusive, brings you to an understanding then of what they do, and so you can work together as partners. Some of it they've done in big projects. Well, that was Apollo 11. As you know, that was an example that's used a lot in business, how people put down their guards. They decide, how are we going to collaborate better, to be very, very clear on what their mission was and their goals, which is also important for our companies, that we're clear on what our missions are. And they were able to do what they did. They did almost the impossible as far as land on the moon before any other country.
It's amazing. When I'm thinking about collaboration, I'm always thinking about one aspect of it is communication. Another aspect of it is understanding the other party's perspective. Where are they coming from? Whether you are in clinical development or medical affairs or regulatory or commercial or sales or HR or any of these different functions within a drug development. And I think throughout the book, we came up about 20 different functions. And these are like the bigger functions. And under each one, you got plenty of sub-functions, probably somewhere between 10 and 15 under each one. You're talking about 200 plus functions and sub-functions in drug development. It's not just like really just 4 or 5 groups that come together, right? You've got all these different groups. And when you have a good perspective of what their view is, where they're coming from, what the win is for them, because each one of these groups also have their own win, their own excellence that they need to meet. And once you have a better understanding where they're coming from, what's important to them, and how and why they do what they need to do, right? And across the team, that just accelerates everything much, much faster. And part of it is really comes down to the communication. And again, forcing yourself to having those tough conversations, and if you disagree with someone or you're misaligned, you better talk about it in the meetings and in the group, rather than just taking that back to your own office or your own desk and just kind of push it aside because it's not comfortable to talk about. And that's been a great learning. Also thinking about outside of your own group, like across the enterprise, right? Because drug development, it's a teamwork, right? You only win when the entire enterprise, all the different functions are winning together. You either get the drug approved, and it's not even just about approval anymore. It's also access. It's not just bringing the product to the market. You got to be thinking about the patient very early on, and that's another part of the collaboration, right? Collaborating with the investigators, with the researchers, with the clinicians, with the oncologists, patients, advocacy groups, because it doesn't end just with the approval. It also, you want them also to be part of your ecosystem and collaborate and partner with them as well, and understand their perspective, so you can get to the finish line faster.
One of the things that really thrilled me the most when talking to all the authors and experts of this book is the importance of the patient. I was really amazed how many brought that up and just said, this is the core of what we do for patients, and they should be a part of the process. And you look at even the patient chapter, for instance, and other people who talk about the patient's involvement. There are so many ways now that the patient is being involved in drug development early on, whether that's helping to decide the direction of research, reviewing protocols, publications, being an advocate for you with the FDA. That it's a thrill to me to see that the patient, it really is becoming a part of the process. And the other group that I was thrilled to see too is the innovation partner. The innovation partner, which some people call solution providers or vendors, has become more and more important to companies. And they should be looked at as a partner too, brought in early so they understand your company. In other words, innovation partners are being brought in, especially for AI solutions, digital solutions, things that usually one company cannot tackle. But these innovation partners have the focus, that they have the depth, that they can really help companies if brought in early.
Absolutely. I mean, we estimated, I think through our research, we estimated that there are probably close somewhere between 5,000 and 7,000 innovation partners or pharma partners. These are, as you mentioned, service providers that help the pharma to get to the finish line and bring the product to the market from all different angles. And a lot of them are not just single providers. They touch so many different functions within a drug development. There's with our own experience, right? I mean, there's not a single function within the pharma that does not partner and work with an agency or a consulting firm or a service provider, whether it would be a CRO or a CRA or medical agencies or whatever the case may be. There are definitely part of this whole ecosystem that we don't want to forget about. Kirk, tell us a little bit about the book. This is something that I'm really personally proud of. That this is not, even though it's 24 pages in 24 chapters and 500 pages, you don't have to read it, end to end, and you don't have to read it sequentially. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, we were very conscious from the very beginning in talking to the authors that we wanted to make it clear to help people find things. So in other words, you have all these expert or voices in the book. So with the continuity, the organization of each chapter being the same, people can find things very easily. We also paid very much attention to acronyms that were used. So someone just coming into the industry, this book is excellent because it goes through all of the different partners that they may be thinking about as far as their careers or they're going to have to work with. But not everybody is familiar with the acronyms. So there's a part in the back of the book that has the acronyms. It also has a well-developed glossary so that people who maybe don't have the experience with working with these partners will be able to find things quickly. And the book itself is just the start. I mean, we don't have every partner. We have a lot of the partners for drug development. There are others also, but it was more of an example, a framework set up as far as how we work through all these other partners working more together, as I said before, to increased understanding so we have increased collaboration. So with that, it's the start. Then our authors came to us and said, well, is this it? Should the book just be alone, or should we have like we have in so many other areas of communication, the pharmaceutical business, another channel to take it out to the public. And that's where OVN comes in, as far as giving them the possibility of having podcast discussions, putting up publications that they've done, and that we could communicate among each other, not particularly about the science like so many other organizations are orientated, but about how do I become a better me in my discipline? And how do I understand the people I'm working with more so that we can become a better company?
Right. And I think that's a great distinction that you just brought up, and the differentiator, that we're not really focusing with this book on the science and the clinical data or trials or studies or anything like that. And even with Oncology Voice Network, it's focused on the functions, right? It's focused on how can I do my job better? How can I optimize what I'm doing? And how can I collaborate, partner with all the different groups that we just talked about, and not necessarily duplicating what's already out there, because there's a lot of great organizations and communities out there that are already focusing on the science, clinical trials, the latest data. And this is not what we're about. We are focusing on the functions and optimizing your effort in what you do on a day-to-day basis, and how you collaborate and think across the organization rather than just your own function.
You know, you and I have been mentors to so many people as far as coming into the pharmaceutical business, going into R&D or medical. And when people would ask, well, can you tell me a book that's good for me as far as introducing me to the industry and all these disciplines? If you remember, we couldn't really find it. First of all, a lot of them are published a while ago. Second, some of them are just too deep in the science at each of the areas. But we want to hit a balance here that gives us a good communication of what each person does and how they become better partners. So that was the emphasis of this book, giving people that information.
I think it sparked the idea as we were kind of writing this book with the authors, that what comes next that you talked about, and how do we bring the book to real life? Because it was very apparent within 6 months to a year in kind of interviewing the authors that, okay, this is great, this is fantastic. First step of many a step that needs to come. But how do we make this real? By the time the book is even written, a lot of these things has already evolved. A lot of the topics that we were talking about has evolved. And that was really also the genesis of Oncology Voice Network, a digital online community for people that are in oncology drug development. And we estimate it to be somewhere between 800,000 to 1 million people that are touching some part of the oncology drug development in pharma and biotech. Couple of thousand companies that are involved, whether it's phase 1 or discovery phase, all the way to companies that have already drugs in the market as well. And our vision and our hope is that we can build an online community for these folks to come together to share their best practices, talk about their online, talk about their best, the lessons learned, the mistakes that they've taken, which is even more important than the right way of doing things. A lot of times you learn when you talk about the things that I didn't do right, and I learned I learned the hard way. It's not about also sharing something that is a secret to your company, right? These are not focused on a secret sauce of every company that they have. This is more of, here's how we did things, and here's how it worked out, and here's that we did it another way and it didn't work out, like a lot of the different societies and different associations that you see.
You know, another inspiration to me, Ramin, as I said, I was inspired by how many people, when we called them to be authors, said, yes, I'm in, count me in. Why hasn't this been done before? But the second stage of that inspiration has been the number of our authors, almost all of them, who want to be a part of the continuing communication about this subject. And I was working within OVN or other channels as far as how do we bring people closer and work on better collaboration. So that has been really inspired to me, that after the book was finished, it wasn't like they said, okay, we're finished, but they want to continue to work on the subject.
That is so true. Even with the advisory council that we're building for the U.S. and the Global Advisory Council and Asia Pacific, one of our authors is coming from APAC region, and he was very gung-ho and excited and inspired. Oh, I want to bring this to the region, and building a group of great minds in that region that can come together and take the word out and take the learnings out to all of the regions. And that was another reason that honestly we wanted to make sure that this book is written and it's very fairly priced, right? So everybody can pick up a copy, right? Everybody, no matter where you are in the whole globe, you'll be able to afford to pay, $20 and pick this up. And as you mentioned, read it as your leisure, whichever department that you have most interested in, and use it as a reference book, almost. And I'm already getting a lot of great feedback on that as well. As you know, and I don't know if I mentioned this or not, we're the Amazon bestseller in multiple different categories. We launched the book about 5 weeks ago, or 6 weeks ago, September 9th, right? And it has picked up, and very proud of everybody that has been involved. Any last word, Kirk, for our listeners? Anything that comes to your mind that you'd like to share?
No, I think, I think we've really said most of what needs to be said, but just for people not to be discouraged sometimes by their company as far as feeling isolated, they should continue to work on reaching out and communicating. As we saw, communication is so important for an understanding that brings increased collaboration. And hopefully, too, like we've done with other organizations, together, we can bring people together to communicate about the best ways of doing this. That you're not alone, that we're all trying to bring people together as far as develop faster cures for cancer.
Absolutely. For all of our listeners, if you're interested, I hope you check out our website, Oncology Voice Network. We're building this together. I don't want you to go to the website and thinking that we have everything figured out, because we honestly haven't. There are a lot of great people that are listening to this program, and a lot of great people that will be involved as we evolve and grow more. And we love to hear from you. We love you to go on the website, become a member. It's free. Share the content that you have already developed. Maybe you've written a couple of white papers. Maybe you have some ideas that you wanna write something up, and or maybe you've done some podcasts that you think you can upload it. We made it really, really easy for people to join and be part of this movement. Kirk, I think we've come to the end of our first show.
Maybe one more thing, and that's, if it gets in focus, to show the cover of the book, so you know what to look for.
I love
your
that
bookstore at the airport.
I'll buy it, but I love that cover.
Voices of Oncology. OVN. Thank you.
Kirk, thank you very much for your time. This was
thank you, Ramin.
Great talking to you.
It's been a pleasure. Bye.